is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We are not taking time off. We are not slowing down this summer because that Liberal agenda is quickly moving. So we need your help to push back against it. To like, comment, subscribe, share this program. If you can't listen or watch the program in its entirety right this second, download it later on, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. We're going to talk about this week a topic that we started last week with Adam Chambers regarding the cost of living. This focuses entirely on the cost of groceries, the cost of agriculture, doing business in the farming sector. To talk about that, we're going to bring on John Barlow, the Member of Parliament for Foothills, a good friend of the show, also the critic for agriculture and agri-food in the, Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. So thank you very much, John, for coming on.
Thanks very much for having me, Jamie. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, this is a topic I'm hearing from farmers in my area, and I know right across this country. And I think Canadians are waking up to the fact that groceries are going through the roof. The cost of groceries are going through the roof. But to make matters worse, the government very quietly, I think, announced that they plan to reduce by 30% its fertilizer use by 2030. It's already been a complex year for the agriculture sector in pretty much every sector. This is just going to make things a lot worse. And I can't understate how bad it's going to get. I know my farmers are telling me. Maybe, John, you can fill us in.
Yeah, this is really adding fuel to the inflationary fire is what the Liberals are doing on a couple of points when it comes to input costs. We've already seen the impact the carbon tax is having on fuel and certainly on fertilizer. But last November, the Liberals announced at COP26 in Scotland, unbeknownst to any stakeholder group in Canada with no consultation, that they were going to put in a target of decreasing fertilizer use by 30% by 2030. This caught producers really off guard. No one saw this coming. There was no rhyme or reason to this or even any explanation on how this is going to be accomplished. Ironically, despite us pushing on this for the last 6 or 8 months, it has taken an uprising in Europe and Netherlands and Italy and Sri Lanka as well for Canadians to start to take notice on the possible consequences of a massive reduction in fertilizer use. And the consequences of that are going to be smaller yields from Canadian producers. And as a result of that, higher food costs for Canadian consumers.
So we're already seeing farmers who are struggling with the cost of fertilizer already. Of course, the tariffs imposed by the Canadian government on fertilizer bought from Russia. Many of that product was purchased well before the tariffs were even put in or even the conflict started. So this is something farmers have been calling for. Just we understand we don't want to keep funding the war in Ukraine. We don't want to keep sending money to Russia. But this product was purchased before the tariffs, before the conflict, well in advance. And they're just asking for the tariffs to not be applied for that. But if they want to continue the tariffs, that's fine. But don't punish things that were purchased before any conflict was started.
Yeah, let's be really clear about the Liberals' fertilizer tariff. The only people paying for this tariff are Canadian farmers. Putin isn't paying this tariff. We have asked for an exemption from the tariff for anything purchased before March 2nd when Russia invaded Ukraine. But let's really put this in perspective. We are the only G7 country in the world that is enforcing a tariff on fertilizer. Our most trusted allies understand the important and critical role that their agriculture sectors are going to play, not only in feeding their own constituents, but also filling the void of what is going to be a massive shortage of corn, barley, wheat as a result of Ukraine losing much of its crop. And that's 25% of the global supply of wheat, corn, and barley. That you can't take that out of circulation without having a massive impact on food security. So our G7 allies understand that they are going to have to step up and improve yields, increase productivity to try and fill that gap. The contrarian here, the outlier here, is the Liberal government here in Canada, which has asked for massive reductions in fertilizer use, has increased the carbon tax, and has put a tariff on fertilizer. All of these things handcuff our ability to not only feed our own constituents at an affordable price, but also step up, and which the farmers I've spoken to in the past few months, they see that as a moral obligation to be able to help feed the world in times of need, because we have the capacity to do that. But we can't do that if we don't have the tools we need to reach our potential.
Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, many are saying, is being hit with, of course, the war. That's restricting their ability to have their trade continuing, especially in agriculture. But at the same time, you mentioned it earlier, or just a second ago, I should say, what's going on in the Netherlands. The government is basically shutting down, or plans to shut down, tens of thousands of farms to meet their climate targets. And according to this Newsweek article, you shared it on your social media, and I will do the same very shortly. From the Newsweek article, I'll quote, "What is particularly frustrating is that the government is fully aware what it is asking farmers to do and will drive many of them out of existence. In fact, the government originally planned to move at a slower pace until a lawsuit brought on by environmental groups in 2019 forced an acceleration of the timetable." So the Netherlands, which is another huge agriculture exporter, is going to see its ability to produce products of all kinds limited. We have Ukraine being limited, and at the same time, Canada is being asked to produce more, but our own government is saying, no, wait a second, that's not going to happen either.
Well, you're exactly right. You have Ukraine, which is, as you said, the breadbasket of Asia and Europe, many parts of Africa, but you have the Netherlands, which is the largest agriculture exporter on earth, second only to the United States, which is incredible. And it shows you the efficiency of the Dutch farmers. But their government is saying you need to reduce fertilizer use and nitrogen emissions by 70% by 2030, I think, over the next 8 years. And even the Dutch government is admitting what they are asking is impossible. It's impossible to achieve unless you basically shut down your agriculture sector. So what is going to become of this is, as you said, farmers are going to go out of business, but also Europe is going to be unable to feed itself. And it's certainly not going to be able to do that affordably. They are going to have to start importing food from other places. Now, one of those places would have been the Ukraine, but now Ukraine is unable to meet that demand. So they're going to be looking at places like Canada and the United States. So opportunities there, but 30,000 Dutch farmers and consumers have stepped up and said, this is unacceptable. You are making, as that lawsuit states, you are making decisions based on activism, ideology, not based on sound science. And when you ask farmers, this is the nonsensical part of this, Jamie, is when you ask farmers to reduce their fertilizer use, what you are doing is asking them to go back in time and use practices that we have not used in decades. And we haven't used those practices because they are not environmentally sustainable. We have zero tillage in much of Canada now. So now you're going to be asking them to go back and start tilling, starting to use chemicals we haven't used in decades, starting to pass over their land multiple times, spraying these chemicals. We have increased yields by 60% over the last couple of decades on the same amount of land, while at the same time reducing our inputs. We have been able to do that because we have embraced new innovation, new technology like seed varieties, and the most modern fertilizer options that are available. So if you think about that, by using fertilizer, we're producing more, we're on the land less, fewer inputs, more sustainable for the environment and for the economy. This decision sends agriculture back decades and is more environmentally damaging than what we're doing now.
On the contrary, John Barlow, the federal agriculture minister, Marie-Claude Bibeau, called the government's target ambitious and claims it's one that farmers will embrace. That's the federal agriculture, a 30% reduction in fertilizer use by 2030. It's a policy that farmers will embrace.
Well, I don't know how many farmers she's actually spoken with then, because that is certainly not the message I am getting. And as you said, was speaking with your constituents, not the message that you're hearing. I was Agriculture in Motion last week in Saskatoon with, tens of thousands of our brightest entrepreneurs highlighting new innovation and new technology and the incredible advancements that we've had in modern Canadian agriculture. And we are able to do these things because farmers are always looking for ways to be more efficient, looking for ways to protect their land, their soil, their water, and their livestock. No farmer wants to increase their costs and reduce their productivity, but that's exactly what the Liberal government is asking us to do. So we are going to be environmentally unsustainable, but most importantly, economically unsustainable under this Liberal policy.
I'm going to build on that in just a second. I just want to point out an article posted yesterday on the website, Food Ingredients First. A quote here, it's estimated that the 30% reduction in fertilizer use by 2030 for a farmer with 1,000 acres of canola, 1,000 acres of wheat, it stands to have their profit reduced by approximately $38,000 a year. It could go as high as $41,000 a year. It could represent a loss of $400 million in Canadian dollars for wheat farmers and $396 million in reduction for canola farmers. These are huge numbers. These are dollars going out of the economy, out of the farmers' pockets, all to meet a arbitrary deadline set by an activist government.
Exactly. MNP did a very quick overview on what the economic impact of this would be, and it came out at $48 billion. $48 billion it would cost Canadian agriculture, and that is only to the frontline producer. That does not include the impact that has to our rural economies and our rural communities that rely on agriculture. So that number is probably exponentially higher. But to make that decision that is actually contrary to sound science and good data, that is going to be debilitating to Canadian agriculture and to Canada's economy, but also inhibit any ability that we have to step up in a global time of need is really frustrating, not only for Canadian farmers, but I think if the average Canadian knew what was going on and the consequences of this, I would hope that they would be outraged just as much as we're seeing in the Netherlands.
Well, let's talk about that. As we pointed out, the Dutch government seems to be doing that on purpose. They're punishing their farmers on purpose. The Canadian government seems to be doing exactly the same thing. Different ways about it, but they are doing basically the same thing. So very soon, it'll be very difficult for many countries to feed themselves. Many farmers will leave the trade, go out of business, not be able to have the same yields they once had. At the same time, we've destroyed our oil and gas sector, our energy sector. Mining industry is hurting. The lumber industry is hurting. What the heck is left? We are just going to be poor and hungry, it seems.
Well, I think the Liberals have this vision, this utopian idea that everyone's going to survive on an office job for Shopify or Google on a beanbag chair without understanding where real jobs and real equity is created. So I think that's the first issue here. But yeah, you're right. When you look at our recovery post-COVID, there are a few industries that you need to rely on where you can raise taxes and raise revenue. And energy and agriculture are the two that we have seen as a result of COVID and the conflict in Ukraine that the world needs. The world needs Canadian agriculture. The world needs Canadian energy. But unfortunately, the Liberals are following the European Union model of this farm-to-fork policy, which is debilitating to agriculture, forced organic farming, forced reduction in fertilizer use, taking ag land out of production, all in the name of this green agenda, where we should be following what the Americans are starting, which is the Sustainable Production Partnership, which is to try and push back against that European Union, what I would argue is very bad policy. The Americans have started kind of a contrarian partnership, and it took Canada months to join that, and they haven't talked about it at all. They are clearly following the European model, and I firmly believe that the tariff on fertilizer, this emissions reduction target, the carbon tax, are all the way for the Liberal government to force farmers to use less fertilizer or pay the price.
Well, as the activists start to take critical segments of our agriculture industry out of play, even before COVID, there were talk about reducing our consumption of meat, especially beef cattle. So you take that out. What does that do to the other sources of meat? Pork, poultry, turkey. It drives the price of that meat up, because you all of a sudden have that loss of kind of the red meat in the marketplace. But at the same time, they're saying, well, okay, we want to focus also on a plant-based diet. I've also heard an insect-based diet.
Right.
Not a fan of either. But this is something that the rich in society will never be affected on. They'll still be able to afford whatever meat is still available at whatever price. But it's the average person who will suffer as a result.
Yeah, that Newsweek article, I think they dubbed it these luxury beliefs that the elites can afford to impose their activist agenda on the average citizen who can't afford to make these changes. And even worse, these luxury beliefs aren't based on anything that's actually factual, and that's what makes this so frustrating. And you're right. I believe that's what the front of pack labeling was all about, is to punish livestock and animal protein. We saw that a few years ago with the new Canada Food Guide, where they pretty much eliminated animal agriculture and animal proteins as part of a healthy diet without a lot of pressure from the opposition. We would not have seen some changes to that food guide and seen some changes, thankfully, to the front of pack labeling. But there's no question they are pushing hard on eliminating some of these key parts of Canadian agriculture. And again, you look at animal agriculture, it's imperative to protecting some very critical parts of our ecosystem. The Canadian prairie grasslands, that ecosystem is one of the most endangered on Earth. And if it wasn't for the grazing of livestock, whether that's cattle, sheep, that land would be lost forever. So animal agriculture also plays a critical role in protecting endangered grasslands and our wetlands.
Sadly, we're almost out of time, but as you know, the guests always get the last word. Maybe you can use this time. Give us some hope, John Barlow. Tell us what the Conservatives are doing to protect Canadian agriculture and make it a pinnacle of the economy once again.
Well, I think that's the key point, Jamie, is under the Liberal government, and you look at who they've chosen as agriculture ministers, it's clearly not a priority for them. And their policy is being driven by the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Health, not the Minister of Agriculture. Where in stark contrast, when we were in government with Minister Ritz, we made big changes. But even as opposition, we had a big win by ending the front of package labeling on ground beef and pork, and we will continue to push.
Thank you very much, John Barlow, Member of Parliament for Foothills, also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Agri-food. Loving the beard, John Barlow. Well done. Thanks for taking time. I know you're at a conference in Calgary right now, but really appreciate this conversation. Hope to have you on again. Hopefully we are able to reduce what the Liberals are doing and the damage to our agriculture sector and many parts of our economy. And to do this, we ask that you like, subscribe, share this program, even comment on it. Help us push back against that Liberal agenda. And of course, tell your friends about it. They can download and listen to this program on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. New content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We do appreciate it. And until then, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That is the blueprint.